Well, thank you everyone for being here. This is really a great morning for Seattle, for Washington State, for families and kids throughout our region, and hopefully we'll set a policy nationwide for people to look and take action when they can to protect kids, protect families, communities, and neighborhoods. When I was running for mayor, I said in my over and over on the trail in my first State of the City speech that we have to acknowledge the role that gun violence plays in our community and do what we can to reduce it. We said as a city we would not accept the continuing level of gun violence that we're seeing. And I want to thank the people who are here today. We've got Moms Demand Action with us today. Thank you very much for being here. We have the Brady campaign also with us. The Washington Alliance for Gun Responsibility, and Washington Ceasefire. We also have in the room public health officials who themselves are doing their own things to make sure that we reduce the level of death and harm that comes from guns. I want to thank them for what they do every day to keep our community safer. We're standing here today because we are very fortunate to be in a community that has a commitment and a bias towards action. We know that we cannot stand by when our communities and our children are threatened by levels of violence that are unacceptable to us. I particularly want to thank Councilmember Lorena González for being such a staunch advocate for families and children in public safety throughout her career. And for not just shepherding through this legislation, but making it better when it got downstairs to make sure that we had the right penalties in place as well as the right incentives. You know, we are very fortunate to have a city that is willing to act to protect across things. And we do it because we know that having guns that aren't locked up present a real danger and threat to our children and to our families. In 2015 alone, it was estimated that 150,000 adults in King County reported having firearms but not locking them up. 150,000. In Seattle, we had, in 2017, almost 250 guns used in crimes that were stolen guns. And we also know from the data we've seen that far too often children having access to guns can be a leading contributing factor to suicides, which are one of the leading causes of death for kids. We can stop that by making sure we lock up our guns. I want to make it very clear, we are not interfering with the right to bear arms or the Second Amendment rights or with the Washington state law. We are not stopping anyone from legally owning a gun, from legally transporting a gun. We're saying that when you leave it, lock it up. When you leave it, lock it up. And that's what responsible gun owners do. And I will tell you that we are very, very lucky. We know that working with people throughout this community, responsible gun owners, they believe in locking up their guns. They know that that's what a good and responsible gun owner does with their gun. I'm very confident that this law not only complies with state and federal law, but I also think when I've been out talking to people, even those gun owners who have strong opinions about the Second Amendment, they believe in locking up their guns. So we were also, I want to thank Pete Holmes for his leadership in this issue in particular, but also as being a great partner across the board in making sure that city laws in this area are upheld and vigorously defended. We were able to get Everytown for Gun Safety. They announced that they and their partners at ORIC, LLP they now call themselves, are willing to act pro bono to help the city of Seattle defend this law should it be challenged. Because we wanted to make sure that we had a strong law that would help save lives and also protect the public and not be subject to litigation that would cost taxpayers. So I want to thank you, Pete, for your leadership. I want to thank Everytown for Gun Safety and our partners for helping us on this, because we know that if we act, more cities will act, not just in this state, but across America. And if more cities act, we will make such a huge difference. because more and more people are living in urban areas. More and more urban areas are having people that own those guns. And often those are first-time gun owners that if they just know, and if they're just required, and if they're given the ability to do so, they will be responsible, they will lock their guns up. I really want to thank the Children's Hospital and Harborview Hospital. They themselves have been in the forefront of providing information and resources for public safety and for gun ownership. They're going to be doing a giveaway of ability gun safes and lockups this fall to make sure that those people who own guns can have access to safe storage at a reasonable cost. I also want to thank Dan Dunn, who has been the lead counsel in the City Attorney's Office, who has been the person who has not just been thoughtfully working with us on this bill, but worked on other things to make sure that our city is safe from guns. We will continue to work with our city partners and our state partners to see if we can get common sense legislation statewide. Because we know it's not enough for the city of Seattle to act. Everybody should act. People and guns move across city lines easily. We need to make sure that these kind of common sense laws are on the books everywhere in Washington state. Because every time we lock up a gun when we leave it behind, we stop it from getting in the hands of a criminal who might steal it and use it in a crime. We stop it from getting in the hands of a kid who might just be curious and accidentally discharge it and hurt themselves or others. And we stop it from getting in the hands of someone who might at that moment be thinking that they can't live and might want to take their own life. We've seen that in suicides, those suicides that are attempted with gun are so much more likely to be lethal than other forms. So this legislation is good for our city, it's good for our community, it's good for families, and it shows when we want to act, we can act. When we want to act, we can act, and if we act together and work together as a community, I know that we can make ourselves safer, we can make sure that we reduce crime, and we give every kid a chance to grow up in the city of Seattle to be whatever they want to be. So with that, I want to give you City Attorney Pete Holmes, but before they do that, just one thing, that this venture would not be successful if we didn't have already a very strong commitment from our police department towards reducing violence, to making sure that guns don't end up in the right hands, and to seeing how education and law enforcement have to work together. And I will tell you, there is no bigger champion than that than Carmen Best. And she's going to give some remarks later too, but I just want to give my personal thanks to the decades of service she has given to this city to make sure that we're doing everything we can to both provide opportunity, to keep the public safe, to reach out to youth, and to do smart things around gun ownership. So my thanks to her, and with that, I'm going to give you Pete Holmes, who has some remarks to give as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks all of you for being here, and thanks to all of our terrific supporters. We know that these challenges are sometimes difficult, and I'm here to tell you that I believe that safe storage is the critical element of responsible gun ownership. We know the status quo hasn't kept us safe. It hasn't kept guns out of the hands of children or other unauthorized users, and that's why I'm very thankful to see this bill signed into law today. It's been an honor to work with Mayor Durkan and Councilmember González to develop this common sense gun safety legislation, and it's meant to save lives. The bill does not infringe on anyone's constitutional rights. This is about prohibiting children, criminals, and people in the midst of mental health crises from accessing firearms. If a curious child comes across your unsecured gun, it's on you. If a person in a mental health crisis uses your unsecured gun to hurt themselves or others, that's on you. If someone steals your unsecured gun and uses it in a crime, then at least partially, that's on you. A gun is a deadly weapon, so it's a no-brainer to keep it out of the wrong hands. Having grown up in rural Virginia, I can tell you that I myself am a gun owner. And yes, those guns are safely secured. So the storage safes that we've talked about in this legislation, they open in an instant. No one is requiring that you acquire a bank vault or a 10-point encryption code. These are simple, open, close safes that can be used with a fingerprint code or short key. Even gun rights groups hail responsible gun ownership, which is why I'm waiting with bated breath for their statement of support for this legislation. Under state law, Seattle has limited options when it comes to firearm safety, let's face it. So when we found an opportunity to pursue local legislation, I'm very pleased that the mayor and council leapt at the opportunity. Like with any legislation involving firearm safety, however, it's safe to assume that this legislation has not yet been, but will be challenged in court by the NRA and its allies. But this is gun safety legislation today, and I'm thankful that Every Town for Gun Ownership and the law firm ORIC LLP will represent the city pro bono, that's at no charge, to defend any challenge that might be brought. We've made serious progress in keeping firearms out of the wrong hands, whether it's from taking guns from domestic violence abusers or through extreme risk protection orders, or where a judge orders a temporary surrender of firearms from those at risk of themselves to others. Today we add another item to our toolbox to keep people safe from guns. The impact will be immeasurable because you can't truly measure the lives that you save when you prohibit access in the first place. So this is an attempt. Anyway, in closing again, I want to thank you, Mayor Durkan, Councilmember González, Chief Best. Look forward to working with you. And all of these advocates, I love these red shirts, Moms Against Gun Violence, the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. And then finally, I'm going to say this is something that's near and dear to me as one of the founding members of Prosecutors Against Gun Violence. Look to more work across the country as Seattle establishes the lead once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete. And now I would like Councilmember González to give some remarks. And again, you know, throughout her career, she has worked to protect victims, to protect families, focused on public safety. She's chaired the committee that did in this thing. And when she got this legislation, she not just figured out to make sure we got it passed, but how to improve it and how to implement it. So I'd like to give you Councilmember González. Thank you so much.
So much. Good morning. I want to thank the Mayor and City Attorney Holmes for all of their cooperation and collaboration on this bill. It is really a shining example of the good that we can all do as a city, as leaders in this city, on such an important issue to so many members of our community, a small representation of which we see standing behind me. All of you also get the real robust opportunity to hear from 3 elected officials who also happen to be lawyers. I'm sorry, and you're welcome. And so, what are the chances of that happening? You know, I felt really honored to be able to have the opportunity to work on this bill. Gun violence is something that has really become a crisis within all of our communities across the country. Seattle is no exception to that. And when we're talking about what we hope to accomplish through this bill, we're talking about the children who are playing in the playground just outside of here today. If I could save one of those beautiful children's lives by requiring the safe storage of a gun, it is worth every single risk that we face if we are challenged in court. Because that's what's on the line. We're talking about, and we're also talking about people who are actively in an abusive relationship. People who are in domestic violence situations are the most likely to fall victim to gun violence in the home. And just imagine the opportunity that a survivor or somebody who is actively being abused has to be able to run out of the house and seek safety and make a call at a neighbor's house or in her car by virtue of requiring safe storage. These are real impacts that can be caused in our community by the passage and the signing of this bill today, and I want to thank the mayor for her vision and her understanding as a former prosecutor that this is really critical for us to take action where we can take action. And I am incredibly grateful that our city attorney has been so creative and thoughtful in figuring out how we can save the taxpayers' dollars by making sure that we have free legal services in defense of this law in the event that we are challenged in court. And so today is a really happy moment for us, and I hope that we're able to implement this immediately. And one of the things that I prioritize is not only just the fundamentals that were sent down to City Council, but also recognizing that we are living in an environment where there are mass shootings throughout our community. And so this safe storage bill also includes authority for the court, for a judge, to give a civil penalties, multiple civil penalties in one incident if there are more than one person's harmed as a result of violating the safe storage. So if somebody goes into a school and shoots down 20 kids, then that person could be subject to additional fines on the basis of the fact that there was massive and multiple injuries and deaths in an event. And so we are going to work hard with our police department and with our public health partners to make sure that people understand that these are the new responsibilities of gun owners here. And I believe that responsible gun owners, as Mayor Durkan has already said, are fully supportive of this legislation, and I hope that we're able to advance it. And I'm really grateful that we have an opportunity to have the rules made and promulgated by our soon-to-be new permanent chief, Carmen Best, who has been a stalwart in this area and understands what's on the line. And so I want to thank her for her service, and I'm looking forward to hosting her in my committee over the next 4 weeks as we consider her confirmation and have an opportunity to make sure that the public knows that she's the right leader for us in this moment. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember and City Attorney, so much for your excellent comments. I will start out by saying there's nobody that's more passionate about this issue than the folks standing before you here today. Certainly the mayor, through her leadership, has made it very clear how important it is to keep this community safe, and any legislation or anything that we can put forward in that regard is important. Councilmember González as well, pushing forth this legislation, truly committed to the safety of our community in every aspect. And of course, the wonderful Pete Holmes as well, our city attorney. I have to call them out specifically because there's not a lot of leaders in this country that will put themselves in front and lead the way innovatively to make sure that we have safety for our communities. And I am fully committed to anything that they put forward to make sure that we keep our communities safe. And to all of the folks here, all the advocates, everyone who's shown up, who is so working so hard to make sure that we have gun safety, you know, I thank you. You have my humble and sincere respect for what you're doing. I know some of these folks in here personally, some have suffered personal loss at the hands of gun violence. So it is so critical that we're here and that we're talking about this. Every day, hundreds of police officers serve the people of Seattle in countless ways. Unfortunately, some of these situations go beyond service and put lives at risk. Officers have seen devastating impact of unsecured guns. It's all of our responsibility, and especially mine as chief, to ensure the safety of our officers and our communities. Providing additional tools to law enforcement in the form of common sense preventative gun laws, such as the safe storage legislation being signed today by Mayor Durkan, is an important and necessary part of our efforts. I can tell you, I'm sure everyone has heard the multiple stories of kids who've found guns in the home of their family or guns in the home of others, who've been experimenting, and they've taken the life of another child, of a sibling, of a family friend. You know, we've heard of even parents, you know, guns unsecured in the home, and a child finds that gun and shoots their own mother or father. So these stories are real, and it's really important that those of us in charge and in leadership make sure that we are fighting hard against those types of tragic outcomes. The evidence is clear. Safe storage can prevent tragic loss of life and help keep our communities safe. Ensuring firearms are safely stored is the responsibility of every gun owner. I know you've heard it before, but it's just the truth. You have a responsibility if you have a gun in your home to store it safely. When we have seen, that is, the way responsible gun laws are making a difference, preventing tragedies and saving lives. The mayor mentioned, and others mentioned as well, extreme risk protection orders as one way that we can reduce gun violence. To date, the crisis response team has served 32 of those orders, and an estimated 55 guns have been removed. 55 guns removed as a result of these orders. The system works. ERPO has prevented a church shooting and the purchase of a gun by a man who was under an ERPO order to defeat the system. These are just a couple examples of ERPO being helpful. To date, the Seattle Police Department has taken, this year to date, 712 guns off the street. 712 guns. That's 18% more than we took last year. So we know that we have to get engaged and involved in every way that we can to make sure that we're keeping guns off the streets. We know that guns and crime have no borders, and our approach to addressing gun violence extends beyond our city and involves partnerships at the local and federal levels to put shooters in handcuffs and get guns off the streets and deter future violence. But now what we can do is we can support our leadership here in the city to make sure that if a person has a gun in their home, that they're safely securing that gun and making everyone, you and I, all of us, safer. Thank you.
So I'm going to sign the legislation, then take a couple questions, if there are any. You made it up here. Yeah, don't be shy.
The mayor is used to people working. She's signing these things.
That's right. That's great. How are you? Yeah? There you go. Anyone who likes because then each pen is the one that we use to sign. I know, right?
One letter at a time.
It is now the law of the city of Seattle. I'm going to go back over here. So happy to take some questions if there are any.
So, question for any of the attorneys out there.
I used to play one on TV.
So obviously you guys are expecting a challenge. Former State AG Ron kind of floated the idea that an argument the other side can make is that storage touches upon possession, and that's a challenge that they could be making here for.
Yeah, I'm a little more optimistic than my city attorney, because I don't have to be the city attorney anymore. I think there's a good chance it won't get challenged seriously. I think you could get somebody who files a lawsuit, but I think on this one that Rob McKenna's just wrong. I think if you look at the law, it does not stop a city. In fact, you can read the rest of the law taken in total, and cities have a great obligation to keep their citizens safe. It's one of our #1 obligations as a city is public safety. And so every statute that is passed by the legislature has to be viewed in that context. And we will do nothing. If you are able and it's legal for you to own a handgun, you can have one. And you can transport it, you can carry it. If you have a concealed weapons permit, you can carry it concealed. But if you leave it behind, you got to lock it up. That's easy. We're not trying to stop anyone from protecting their homes. We're not trying to stop anyone from legally owning a handgun. We're just saying you have a very lethal thing. And if you leave it behind, lock it up. It's actually pretty easy.
Mayor, how specific is the ordinance on when to find safe storage or locked up? Does the gun owner need to buy a gun safe, or is locked in a file cabinet okay?
That's a great question. This is a period of time where we're going to continue to hear from gun owners and talk to public health officials and stuff, because those rules are going to be promulgated by the chief of police. So there could be a range of ways that are safe storage. It could be a locked cabinet. It could be a locked box. There's a variety of ways we want to look at it. We want to make sure that it actually is safe. That's the critical thing. But there's a range of ways to make guns safe and put them away. And you talk to responsible gun owners, they're already doing it. What we want to make sure is, how is it that just this year, Seattle Police Department has taken 700 guns off the street? 700 guns. There's not one vehicle that's going to stop gun violence in this country. It takes everything. It takes education, it takes political will, it takes a variety of laws. The ERPO laws, the Extreme Risk Protection Orders, that's one vehicle. And think of that, 55 guns out of the hands of somebody a judge has determined is a risk. 55 lives might have been saved. So we're going to use every tool we have. This is a really important tool for us to have.
Sorry, if this was addressed, how are you guys going to make sure that these people do have their guns in storage safes or whatever?
We're going to do a range of things. The first thing we want to do is education. We want to make sure that people understand what their obligations are. So we're going to do community education. We're going to work with gun sellers so that they tell people what their obligations are. And we're going to be, we're very fortunate that we have people in this community like Harborview and Children's Hospital who are already doing gun storage giveaways. So we're going to make sure that everyone has those opportunities. We want to make sure also that people who have guns don't feel that there's a barrier for them to lock the gun up safely because of some financial thing. So we want to make free storage as available as possible.
So other than until an incident happens, we don't know if the person does or does not have this following the free law.
Yeah, we will see. Look, I think it's very similar to, if you look at a range of safety things that happen in the history of our country. Seatbelts. It was required to wear a seatbelt. There wasn't people stopping every car that drove by to see if people had their seatbelts on, but you saw people change their behavior. Now it was click it or ticket, and now it can be an independent offense, but they first have to see that you don't have your seatbelt. So there's many times we see where people are in and out of homes. We don't want to get to the point where there's a tragedy. The last thing we want is to have to enforce this law with penalties because someone didn't lock it up and someone got killed, it was used in a crime, or someone used it for another purpose. A kid got it by accident. So the number one thing we want to do is education.
With regard to education, do you plan to engage the public person like the advisory councils, police department already have?
Yes, we're going to use all of our networks and try to get as much information and work with those people. I've been through this process. I've been working with and talked to Second Amendment advocates to say, even if you don't like the law, what can we do to partner with you to get better education? Because again, I think that those people who are the most responsible gun owners lock their guns up. Any other questions?
Just to follow up on the enforcement piece, when perhaps it's more appropriate for Attorney Holmes, you said that's on you about various things that can happen with a gun that's unlocked. Isn't this then just a more effective tool for holding gun owners liable for what happens to their guns rather than preventing them from having locked up guns?
Yeah, I'll let Pete answer that. I'm going to answer it a little bit first. There's a number of ways to deter bad conduct. Education is the number one thing. But people have to understand, if they don't follow the law and something bad happens, they're going to be held responsible for it. They could be held responsible under the statute. They may be held responsible in a civil lawsuit. And we saw that change, for example, in DUIs. If you roll the clock back 20 years, people didn't think much about DUIs as much as they do today. And they certainly didn't think about giving their keys to somebody else or having a bartender let someone walk out. And when we had the first bartender held responsible for that drunk person who drove out and got in an accident and killed somebody, every bar owner suddenly said, don't let him walk out drunk. And so we hope never to have to go there, but everybody should know that we will enforce this law. And if you don't lock up your gun and a tragedy happens, you're going to be held responsible. And we want everybody to think about that when, at nighttime, if they had their handgun next to their bed, and then they get up and go to work, lock it up before you go if you're not taking it with you. It's easy. Do you want to add to that?
Just a minor comment that, it's already the law in Seattle that you must report a lost or stolen firearm. That was part of the gun violence tax legislation that the Supreme Court approved 8-1. That is already the law. This ordinance strengthens the penalties in this, addressing the fact that we're trying to make sure we're getting compliance. My office has yet to prosecute one of those failure to report cases. And so in this ordinance, it is my office that will be issuing citations for the failure to properly store, to report, and the like. We're excited about the prospect. It's a new procedure for us, but we think that it's one of the things working hand in glove with our police department and with Chief Best that we'll be able to gain even greater compliance, while, as the mayor says, we're also trying to further public education.
All right, thank you very much for coming.